Hey everyone, Vinayak here. The AMD Ryzen 9 7950X is one of the flagship processors in the AMD Zen 4 based Ryzen 7000 series, and it's not to be confused with the Ryzen 9000 series, which was recently released. The 7000 series processors are designed for high performance computing, gaming, and content creation. Let's test it out and see if it's still a good choice in 2024. This is the Ryzen 9 7950X, one of AMD's flagship CPUs. Specifications wise, the 7950X has 16 cores, 32 threads, its base clock is 4.5 GHz, and its boost clock is up to 5.7 GHz. Level 3 cache is 64 MB, and the TDP is 170 watts. The 7950X uses the new socket, which is AM5, which supports DDR5 and PCIe 5.0. The process node is 5 nanometers. I'm pairing this CPU with T-Skill Trident Z5 DDR5 RGB RAM, which has a speed of 6000 megatransfers per second. Thermal paste is cryofused by Cooler Master. And for the motherboard, we have the MSI Mag X670E Tomahawk Wi-Fi motherboard. GPU, we have the AMD Radeon RX 7900XT by Sapphire, and everything will fit in this case, which is the Corsair 3500X. Here's the motherboard, and here's the CPU socket. Here are the RAM slots, and here's the chipset. X670E motherboard support PCIe Gen 5 for the M.2 slot, and we have a total of 4 on this motherboard. Land grid array CPUs have pins on the motherboard itself than the processor. Let's get the CPU into the slot. It's in, and the cover just pops off. Install the RAM. And here's the cooler I'm using. It's the Arctic Liquid Freezer 2 360, a 360mm rad AIO, and it has this pump which also has VRM cooling using this fan here. The brackets provided allow installation of this cooler on AM5 motherboards as long as you use the existing backplate. Install the retention mechanism. Let's test if it fits. Okay, good. Now for the thermal paste, and finally fit the pump. Fits perfectly. Now for the M.2 SSDs, I only have 2, but I will be adding more in the future. This is Alexa 1TB NVMe drive. Remove the sticker off the thermal pad and screw the drive down. The second and third slots are under this heatsink. Install drive, remove sticker off thermal pad, and use the same screw to fasten it down. Having to remove a screw for 2 drives is a bit of a letdown. Here's the case, the Corsair 3500X. It's an aquarium style case which also has a glass front. Install the motherboard into the case. The fans are set to exhaust through the radiator as I had it on my earlier system. Here's the XPG core reactor fully modular 850 watt power supply. This is also a transplant from my existing system. Install the PSU, connect the 24-pin power. I had to remove the radiator to access the 8-pin power ports, connect them and install the radiator back. The front panel connector, I love that it only has one cable you need to install. I hate it when they're all separate. And now for a test boot. Ever since AM5, all CPUs have integrated graphics, so I can test the system without a GPU installed. Yay, the system has booted. I can see the 7950X and 32GB RAM installed. So now I can start installing the GPU. The Radeon 7900XT is a massive card, and the Corsair 3500X can fit GPUs up to 410mm. I have ample space next to the GPU. The GPU comes with a support bracket which I have also installed. Now to boot and test. Everything's running. But I didn't like the look of the GPU power cables in front. So I'm using the extension cable by Ant called the Neon Glow, which has RGB support too. It's flexible, making it easy to install. Everything's installed and let there be light. We have this cable comb provided to keep the cables in place. Looks really nice. Now that the system is ready, let's start benchmarking. Performance wise, first Cinebench R23 with a multi-core score of 36,236 and a single core score of 1944, it's pretty good. I have friends who have better scores as in 37-38K range, but this is stock with no overclocking or undervolting. In TimeSpy Extreme, we get a score of 12,886. Firestrike Ultra, we have 17,163. And Port Royal we get 14,123. Geekbench we get a score of 2,04,032. Power draw, the 7950X has a high TDP of 170 watts, which is quite power hungry compared to earlier Ryzen models. This results in higher heat output and power consumption, especially under load. You will need a robust cooling solution to handle the heat produced by this chip. High-end air coolers or preferably liquid cooling systems are recommended. Gaming, let's start with Cyberpunk 2077. I'm putting full load on the system with ray tracing at Ultra and at 4K. FSR is on as I'm using the 7900XT. The GPU is at 99% load with a temp of 65 degrees and the CPU is at 75 degrees. The 7950X is pulling around 111.9 watts and the GPU is around 319 watts. CPU memory being used is 10 GB. The 7900XT has 20 GB of VRAM. We are getting a healthy 57 FPS at its highest and 48 to 49 FPS at minimum. Let's try out path tracing. My GPU used to fall to its knees for the test, but now I feel they might have updated support for Radeon cards and we get around 25 FPS. Power draw and temperature looks to be similar to how it was earlier. Red Dead Redemption we get 159 FPS at max and minimum of 28 FPS. Average is 106. This is at 4K with everything at Ultra. Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1080p we get 248 FPS average, and at 1440p we get 214 FPS and 118 FPS at 4K. Forza 4 we have 198 FPS at 4K, 198 FPS at 1440p, surprising, and 281 FPS at 1080p. Metro Exodus Enhanced ran well on the system, and with extreme settings at 4K with ray tracing on, we get 38 FPS on average and the highs at 54 FPS. At 1440p we get average 68 FPS with highs at 93 FPS. And 1080p we get 89 FPS as average and 123 FPS at the highest. Adobe Premiere 4K timeline rendering takes only 3 minutes 15 seconds now. On my 5800X, the same timeline takes around 7 minutes 50 seconds. That's quite a jump and helps with completing my work faster. This is the compression score between the 5800X and the 7950X. Higher is better. This is how the fans sound when running CPU intensive workloads. The difference in gaming performance between the 7950X and more budget-friendly options like the Ryzen 7700X or the Intel Core i7-3700K is small in many cases, making the 7950X more future-proofing choice for the extreme gaming setups. So who is this for, and should you be picking up the 9000 series instead? The 7950X is great value for money because it is at least 20,000 rupees less, and actually the 9000 series processors are being overpriced on online stores. I've not tried offline stores as yet, but if you want a processor in the Ryzen 9 series which is equivalent to the 9950X and you don't want to spend that extra money, the motherboards anyway are AM5 and supports both even the 7000 series and the 9000 series on the same one. We just need to update the BIOS. Processing power wise, the 7950X is pretty good. You may be losing around 2,000 to 3,000 points in Citybench and a little performance everywhere else. Other than that, this processor is pretty good. One downside of the 7950X is that it gets hot really fast. So you need a good cooler. Maybe a 360 Rad AIO would be best. Gaming wise also, this processor was quite fast and it was able to push enough data to the 7900XT which I am using. So there would be not much of a difference if you're using it for gaming, because these are not meant for gaming. For gaming, the 7600 and the 7700 are more better or more value for money. But if you have actual editing work, 3D animation, 3D modeling, the 7950X or the 9950X are better choices. I've been using it for editing, on Premiere and also After Effects, and it has been working properly. So what do you guys think? Should you be picking up the 7000 series processor, which is the 7950X, or should you wait for the price to drop on the 9000 series 9950X? Make sure to comment below. Also make sure to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified when new videos are added. Thank you for watching and see you all next time.